Uh, Here we go. I think the topic for discussion goes back to that question of how much are we going to spend funding our community applications, and is there a separate set aside that happens for housing related projects because we heard that as a priority, or is there a set aside within, like, do we allocate X number of dollars, let's just say 5 million for applications, and we say we specifically want to fund housing related things with 2 million of that, or do we set aside the 5 million plus 2 million for housing, which is 7 million, or do we just not do a set aside for housing and we just rely on the application review process to make sure that we meet those priorities? So I will say 5 million, it was, I only got a couple of homeworks, but 5 million was a number that a couple of commissioners put forward as an amount. But interestingly, some put the 5 million as like just the city side amount within a separate county side amount versus just 5 million total. But maybe that's a number we can start having some discussions around. Let me share our little graph here so you can see and remember what we had left if we funded the infrastructure projects as laid out in our chart. And you can see those numbers in the brighter yellow. And then you can see where we've added in the revenue replacement. So that's the other part of our discussion is, do we include any of that? Do we recommend including any of that revenue replacement in the amount that we're going to fund using the applications? Or do we allocate that revenue or recommend allocating that revenue replacement? Again, that's actually in the budget numbers. So it's a little bit different in where that money sits right now and who has authority over it. But do we recommend setting aside the revenue replacement or part of that to do grant matches? I think is another piece of that conversation we had last meeting that I think we need to continue today, because staff is looking to know whether and to what extent we want to set aside part of the money related to ARPA to manage the match funds for all of these federal grants that are coming out and that we're applying for. Again, we know we won't get 100% of those grants, but for any that we do get, we know there are going to be matches that are required. And this is a way for us not to have to pay those matches out of our regular budget dollars if we set aside revenue replacement or some portion of the ARPA. So thoughts about what the amount should look like, whether it should be city or county specific or just in one pot, and whether it should include any revenue replacement. And it looks like Ashley, Kathleen is looking for the Zoom link on the email if you could help her out. Anyone, thoughts?
Commissioner Merkley, it's Melissa. I just wanted, let's go back to the column I. And that's the column of KPK projects that scored. And balance if above are approved, and then balance if we add in the 9.6. So if we add the 9.6 in revenue replacement, we have 14.2 available. So we could add in some lesser amount.
Right.
Okay.
Right. We could say we want to have $7 million total. We're going to take X number of dollars from revenue replacement to sort of make that whole come together. Again, that would have to go through discussion with the full commission during the budget, but there are a fair number of us represented here. So probably we can make our case pretty convincing.
And your earlier comment is in reference to, with regard to housing, we could simply wait to see what the applications represent versus what we heard in the community session, correct?
Right. I mean, I think we can do whatever we want. We have options there. We definitely heard it as a priority. early on in this process, we had talked about whether there was going to be a separate housing, this is months ago now, guys, it feels like years, but we had talked about whether there was a separate just flat out bucket for housing, or whether we address that through the application. So I think either one is doable. Or like I said, there could be a sort of hybrid where we say, well, we're going to address it through the applications, but we were specifically going to give a part of that to how, like we're going to say, a certain amount is going to go toward housing applications. So that would be sort of a hybrid method.
Well, and I find myself thinking, housing in what form?
Right.
Do we want to put parameters, or do we want to have that discussion with the full commission? So housing as in, potential gap funding for a build project, or.
So
Hi, Kathleen. Hi, how are you? Go right ahead. I'm just kind of spouting off what's in my head, really, what I'm thinking about in terms of parameters.
yeah, well, if I think that if we're going to talk about housing, we should bring in the departments that know it about it the best. And there's all kinds of housing issues. But like, affordability in getting into your first home, I mean, there's just a whole slew of housing issues that you can slice this at. So, the survey isn't really specific enough about what the need is, but I did just want to point out that Catherine Carter and I, we can tell you there's about at least 10 apartment complexes going up that are in the works right now. And so, and they may have some economic development incentives, but not a whole lot. And so some of this may be addressed by the private sectors also. So there's a market for it. And the market's changing a lot because mortgage rates have doubled in the last 3 months. So it's a complicated area.
It is. And I guess that's part of, why my brain is wandering around when we say the word housing, because there's a part of me
or what? Yeah, right.
Well, yeah, I guess that's where I am, right? Because it would be interesting to see where the applications, once the applications are in, and then we group those into categories, how many of them pertain to housing. And I would assume up front that housing would be housing support, like what we've been doing all this time, helping with mortgage, helping with rent.
I would not be surprised if most of it would be that, and as opposed to constructing something. But yeah,
I can't imagine receiving an application. I mean, it's possible. We have nonprofit builders, so it's possible we would receive an application through the portal with regard to affordable housing construction. I could see that. I mean, once you start talking about that, if, for example, you split your revenue replacement in half and held back 4.75 million, it's not going very far if you talk about housing construction. But then again, if it's a gap fund, perhaps it is helpful. I mean, so like I said, it's two things for me this morning. It's interesting to contemplate seeing what comes in and how does it compare to those priorities we heard.
Yeah, and I think you've hit on some of the concern, way back when we had that initial discussion, was if we just look at what comes in, is that just continuing to sort of put a Band-Aid on the problem, and not that Band-Aid isn't needed, and not that we don't need the Band-Aid, and not that there aren't a lot of people out there that need that help, but is there a larger strategy that we as a unified government should be somehow orchestrating, that we're going to miss the opportunity to orchestrate if we only look at the applications coming in and they're more for that type of mortgage assistance. And like I said, really critical stuff. The Band-Aid is needed, but does that prevent us from forming that sort of long-term plan, and what would that long-term plan look like? So I think, I mean, those are sort of the questions I think that we have to figure out, whether this committee is solving that issue, whether we're leaving that to that housing group that is meeting, but then who funds whatever solutions they might come up with. Yeah.
I guess the other thing it makes me think about is, you know, again, in looking at the applications, I'm confident that they will fit into our priority categories, right? Because why would they submit, you know, something that didn't? But we also are confident that they will monetarily far outweigh, no matter what figure we say is available, they will outstrip that. You know, my wager is 5 to 1. So then we have that whole exercise to work through in terms of, you know, paring down, if you will, what the requesters would receive. So I'm just kind of saying that, you know, we've got several lenses to look through as we review those. And what did we place as the deadline again?
The
I know
application
that-
deadline.
Yeah, that portal's open, right?
Till May 27th, I believe.
Okay.
So 1 more month.
And so I'm assuming that we're going to create, if we aren't already working on it, that matrix again for review.
Yeah, so I mean, something like we get even for the casino grant dollars, where it summarizes all of the relevant information, and gives us a way to kind of sort and see categories and things like that as we're reviewing that.
I think the other thing I wanted to touch on was the availability of monies on the county side, if you will. So if we could talk through that a little bit, I guess right now when I look at column J, and assuming we do those projects, correct, and we have the 809, then technically what we're saying is if your project represents an area that is not Kansas City, Kansas, I'm just trying to make sure I understand that side of the dollar equation. So, but for example, you might have an agency that represents all of Wyandotte County, right? In which case it would fall on that city side. I don't know.
But Kathleen, we can spend city side money on an organization that serves countywide if we choose to. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can.
So if we just said, which seems to be what I'm hearing from some of you at least, is if we just took all of this money that's left and put it into the application pool and then dealt with anything else that came along by making revenue replacement recommendations. So let's say we're just going to take all this money and let people apply for it. If we were to do that, we would just allocate that money regardless of whether they served Bonner Springs and Edwardsville or KCK. We would just allocate out of that same pool.
Yeah, and by the way, there's also another $750,000 that hasn't been assigned. That's from the immediate needs approval.
Okay. Oh, okay. Can we put it in the pot legally?
Yeah.
Okay, because it didn't get assigned.
Right.
Is unassigned the proper term? I don't want to use bad term. Unassigned.
Yeah.
Immediate needs. Okay.
That's good to know.
Yeah. I'm not remembering if it was city or county, but honestly, you know, it doesn't really matter that much. So, yeah,
Well, I guess my
I think it
point,
was city, but I'm not 100%. Yeah.
I just want to be able to express to the entire county, you know, submit your application,
Right.
basically. Yeah.
Right, yeah, yeah, we want people to understand that that money is available regardless of what area. I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
if you're serving like, you know, Washington State or something, but no. But if
Yeah,
you're
that's-
serving in Wyandotte County, then you're eligible for these funds regardless of what portion of the county you serve.
That's kind of where I'm coming from. Yeah, thanks for that. I will say that I do have a preference for trying to do these projects, these infrastructure projects. I guess we probably all agree on that.
Yes.
Oh, now you're going to show that I didn't do my homework.
Sorry.
There, I did my homework.
Wait, I'll put it back on the other screen. But that's fine because you're here today.
That's
And
right.
actually the individuals who did their homework are not here today. So that's they weren't here for
Good.
discussion, but
It all works out.
out. Yeah.
Then there's
balances out.
Commissioner Kiernan, who is so faithfully did his homework, and he's here. Okay.
No, he says no, he didn't do his homework. He
Okay.
wouldn't.
Um,
But yes, it does look like we have an agreement that we are prepared to move forward with the infrastructure projects we identified, which I think is a step forward at least. for us
it
to-
is a step forward, and I just, you know, I find that our public works infrastructure projects are so daunting that, you know, it's imperative to me that we attack these with some of this ARPA money.
When it's such a long-term benefit, I mean, it doesn't seem like it when you look at air handling systems, it's not sexy, but the long-term benefit, just like when you repair something in your house that nobody ever sees, is just that we have buildings that are functional and we're not going to have to spend money down the line, because eventually we would probably have to deal with these problems anyway. It would just be when we weren't planning for it and we hadn't saved for it. So it's nice to be able to get those projects taken care of. All right, Commissioner McKiernan, do you have anything to add? He's still in the Bermuda Triangle over there.
Yeah, and now I need to find the Word document in my inbox that has back in February when we, you know, did an ARPA resolution, because we're still don't have access to our directory. So I'm trying to find a Word template here.
Did
so
we
that
not
I
put it
can,
in Teams? Oh,
so that I can, yeah, construct a resolution for these capital projects, because it's due for the EDNF on, well, I was just going to try and get it on the EDNF because that's the next committee.
right.
And it is about money. I mean, we could put it on the administration committee, but I don't remember offhand. I think it's too late. It would delay it too much.
Right. Well, we have representation from this committee on both standing committees, so I don't know that it matters which it heads
Committee.
before. Yeah, we have a wide array on our committee, so it works out.
But I
All
don't
right,
want-
so I feel like that question we have sort of settled on an answer, which is like one checked off the list, right? Let's look back at this idea of, I think maybe the first thing to decide is, do we want to put any revenue replacement into the pot for applications? Because if we don't, then we pretty much know what the lid is, right? We know what the top furthest up we can go is if we're going to do these infrastructure projects, and we're not going to put revenue replacement into the pot for applications, then we've got 4,600,000 and 809,000 and the 750 to work with.
Hey, and I do want to point out that as soon as we get the feds to reimburse us for application number 2, then there will be monies freed up. Because some of the ARPA immediate needs budgeted projects were FEMA reimbursable. I think the health department estimated about 1.5 million. And so there's actually, once we get the FEMA reimbursement, which we're still waiting on, if once we get it, then that money will be freed up over on the county side. So that 800,000 will be, roughly $1.5 million greater. So, I mean, that really changes there's more money that we think is going to be made available once we get the FEMA reimbursements.
Okay. Kathleen, I don't know that there's any way of estimating this, but is there an estimate of what amount we might need to set aside for grant matches? Obviously, we don't know what grants we're going to get. We kind of know what percentage each grant might require, but they're all differing in size. Is there just a ballpark or a range that we think would be appropriate if we were going to set aside either revenue replacement or other piece of ARPA funds for that purpose?
Gosh, I really don't have any idea how to estimate that, because
Me neither.
all the grants are different and the project amounts are different, and we don't know what grants are going to be coming down the pipe and what projects are going to be assigned to each and so forth. You know what I mean?
Would it be, so thinking about how the ARPA requirements would impact that, is it important that it be revenue replacement that's set aside because the grants may not be in ARPA eligible areas? So then if we set aside regular ARPA funds, is there a possibility that we couldn't use that as a match if the type of grant didn't meet the ARPA requirements? Am I making sense?
No, you can't. Yeah, no, you'd have to use revenue replacement.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. I mean, theoretically, I guess the project could, but it's really doubtful. Yeah, because most of the projects are capital related, right? So the only capital you can really spend ARPA money on is, air handling. So,
right,
for the most part.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you see what I mean?
Yep. Yep. That's what I was thinking too. I just wanted to confirm.
And then, maybe parks, but, we're sliding in the parks. We're sliding in through some, special. I just know. Yeah.
Okay.
It would have to come from revenue replacement.
Okay.
And you got plenty of time. You don't have to decide. You could just you could recommend to the full commission that all revenue replacement balances, right, in the city and the county, which those numbers are going to change. I would have the updated estimated revenue replacement balances updated by now, except that the cyber attack has blocked my ability to get into the financial system, so I can't update the estimate. Okay, but I'm thinking, well, last time I looked at it about 2 weeks ago, the 9.6 is probably pretty close, and on the county side it's about 5 million. And so what I'm proposing, perhaps the best at the moment, what you all should maybe for the current recommendation, maybe to just let that remain as is and recommend it as grant matching, as part of the budget process that'll be undertaken in June and July. And by then we'll know a little bit more. And, we just set it aside on the balance sheet. And of course, the whole subject of how to spend that money can be revisited into the future years. It doesn't necessarily have to totally be decided, today or this year, or, because they'll just sit there on the balance sheet waiting for a good purpose, is my point. So I guess I don't know. That's what I would do. But on the other hand, 15 million roughly in revenue replacement sitting on the balance sheet is going to be very tempting for folks. So I don't know how long we could keep it on the balance sheet for that good purpose, which is to match grants. But we'll just see how it goes. I don't know. That's what I don't know. Just my thoughts.
Okay. So as Kathleen is suggesting, what we could do is say, I was just doing math on my little calculator over here. Like we have roughly $6 million right now. And as Kathleen said, we may have additional funds based on what the federal government reimburses us going forward, but we could allocate these amounts toward that application process. And we could still have further discussion as a committee about whether we want to have some of that specifically allocated to housing or not, or we just want to see the applications as they come in. We could recommend to the commission that this be held until we know what those match amounts look like. What are your thoughts on that, commissioners?
And we're speaking of match amounts for grant opportunities.
Right, for other grants.
Which I do like that, because that stretches the value of every dollar.
Right, and then if we didn't use them, we didn't get enough grants to spend down all those matches, then obviously that money would still be available for other needs.
As Kathleen points out, we would just have to exercise the restraint to leave it alone while we are waiting for potential grants to match.
Right. We would have to commission team. We would have to keep that money in our piggy bank and have a hands-off sort of policy. I mean, the bummer is if we did spend it down and then we had to make those matches, that money has to come from somewhere. So it'd be nice if it didn't have to, come from our sort of proverbial pocket.
Right, from debt service.
Right. Is everybody feeling comfortable? I'm not hearing anybody say, no, don't put all this stuff in yellow into the application pot because I have some other project I want to spend it on. I'm not hearing that.
I'm comfortable with, as at least as a starting place, this being the application pot. But Kathleen, can you remind us the allocation that we made back in August of 21 for immediate needs was how much? Because I feel like it was $8 million. I don't know what I'm remembering.
Well, I suppose you need to go back to that diagram. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, and I guess I'm, number one, the kind of total amount, and then the ways that it was the projects that we were, I don't know, I'm just curious about how this compares to what we did right out the gate. I'm also curious, and I know this committee right this minute can't answer this question, but what healing has occurred? Like, can we have a look at our community and see what recovery looks like to date? And I don't know that we can this morning, but wouldn't that be interesting to have a feel for how's the recovery going?
So Ashley probably has some thoughts on that. I just wanted to point out that, one of the things that we're working on, so there's two things. First off, the Treasury requires us to submit a report on what monies have we allocated and how much of it has been spent, as well as some programmatic data. And that through March 31st, that's due on April 30th, 3 days from now. Unfortunately, I cannot update that report at the moment because of the cyber attack. So we're probably going to be late submitting that report to the Treasury, and I'm going to send them an email letting them know that's why. Secondly, Ashley and Alan and I have been working with Invisio, which is a software platform. It's a web-based software platform that where lots of folks, who have access can enter in information about, programs in general, and it shows it graphically. on a website. And so one of the things we've done is we've added a module to assist us with, presenting that exact kind of information for our ARPA subcommittee or for the ARPA website. And so right now we're in the midst of implementing that. And that's going to actually explain pretty much everything you're asking for right there. And it would be, we'd update it once a month. And so we're in the midst of implementing that, and that's so it will have information about, how, well, we need to make sure that we have data included in there that demonstrates the impact that the ARPA funding has had on our community. But I do want to point out that, because we were kind of late in getting the money out out in terms of, the allocations weren't actually approved until the end of August. And then it took a while for it to work through the procurement process. So not a lot of money was spent last year. Hopefully a good chunk, well, all of the money for the 1.8 million for housing, that got spent actually, but a lot of the other money didn't get spent. And I don't have a good feel because I haven't run the report for how much was spent in the first quarter of 2022. But just keep in mind that, the money's slowly trickling out to the community, but whether measuring the impact, I believe most of these issues are going to have a delayed kind of effect. It's going to be hard to measure it, the immediate effect, because our data sources are often delayed. So if we want to talk about how much of a benefit the ARPA money has had so far, it may be very well be anecdotal. That's what I sort of feel. But Ashley, did you want to say something? Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of really good examples from other communities. Larimer County in Colorado has a really good impact assessment of the pandemic on their community. So they looked at obviously the direct impacts as well as the cascading impacts, the things that kind of happen as a result of something happening. And so it's a really strong kind of evaluation of that. And I think with some of the community input that we've gotten from the first ARPA workshop, the upcoming presentation of the community survey data, which we will hear tomorrow night, where we can start to really get into at the commission district level and have some of the various questions, including public health added some kind of social determinants of health, which talk about various kind of priorities in the CHIP plan. While maybe not directly related to the pandemic, there's certainly things that we could infer from those insights, which I think would be very valuable to understanding those impacts. And I think, we have an opportunity to continue to push and engage, and that might be a really good opportunity for us to kind of focus on our next community engagement. What other things in our assessment of the impact in terms of our recovery have been accomplished, because there has been some great work both in the not-for-profit side and for-profit side, as well as the work that's being championed by the unified government and our partner agencies. So, maybe that's something we think about in terms of our next workshop, is really kind of diving into the steps that have been made already in terms of moving us towards recovery, so we can kind of continue to move that baseline in terms of where we're at and where we want to go. But I'll share that Larimer County, their COVID recovery plan with you. It's a pretty interesting resource. It's very high level in some places, but it does give you some really interesting kind of examples of how they've been tracking their recovery overall.
That's cool.
Thanks. All right, so I feel like we're reaching some consensus here, and I guess my question, and maybe Kathleen can guide us in this. So what is next for this committee? So we've got our application out there. We've got a little time before those applications roll in for our review. We're going to move this infrastructure package forward for eventual, hopefully, approval by the full commission. We seem to have identified that pot of money that is going to fund up those applications. We'd like to move forward with, it sounds like, that revenue replacement recommendation for further discussion by the commission during the budget. What should we, or do we need to be doing in these next few meetings to keep moving the ball forward and keep providing information to the community and getting ready for those applications. I feel like we're kind of in a little lull period here before the storm hits, before all of the applications come in for review. I mean, is there something we can do to prep as far as like what the format we're going to see those in when they come in? I'm just wondering what we do during this lull that might make the period when those applications roll in less crazy.
Yeah, so the next meeting is May 12th, is that right? That's what I'm looking at my calendar. Right? There isn't one next week?
Ashley has her hand up. I don't know if she can answer that
Is there
question,
one?
but
I
looking
believe
at
May
my
12th is the
calendar.
next one. Yes.
Yeah.
As far as I can tell on my calendar.
Yeah, May 12th.
okay.
Yeah, all
Um,
right. So, so that's 2 weeks before the deadline. And my guess is that, or, you know, we can make assurances that Erica and her team at iParametrics will have, you know, a good list of, you know, applicants that have finalized their applications. So we, you know, we could do a review at the next meeting. We could do a review of the applications that we have so far. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, just maybe get statistics about what,
Uh-huh.
how many we're going to be looking at and how much
Yeah.
that they total so far. And
Mhm.
that'll give us an idea of where we're headed, I think. Ashley, you want to weigh in?
I have
on our
another
goals?
suggestion. Obviously, putting the lens of communications on, I think the committee has made significant progress over the last several months in particular. And I think it would be worthwhile to maybe pull together some type of communication from the committee to the community about where we're at. And that could be a good precursor or a follow-up to a presentation to the full commission, however you decide to move forward on that. But I would love to try to get your accounts as to where we are, what we're looking for, how we're working through this, just because I think there's a lot of value in bringing our elected officials forward and their voices forward on this process, because it has been a very intentional process, and not everyone has been able to attend our committee meetings, although there's a few that have certainly made an extraordinary effort to attend every single one. But I think there would be great value in trying to kind of distill that down to some type of synopsis for the community. And so maybe we could kind of outline what that would look like, what you want to emphasize, where you want to call attention to the community to make sure that in those last 2 weeks before those applications are due, maybe people will be inspired to kind of find ways to fill that application.
Yeah, I think that's great. And some synergy, both in that it'll reiterate the fact that the application's out there for anybody who might have missed that,
Right.
missed that announcement. And then it will also, perhaps depending on how we plan it, it might fall around that time when we're seeing this pass through our committee as an infrastructure package and provide some additional background information related to that process as well, and how we arrived at that infrastructure list. Good. Commissioners, any comments or thoughts on that program moving forward? Getting a thumbs up from Commissioner McKiernan.
That sounds good.
Okay. Well then, Ashley and I can regroup and start to work on that communication, and she may reach out to you guys for additional information or quotes or whatever she needs to put together her effort. Sounds like Commissioner McKiernan will see the infrastructure package before his committee, and then we'll just let those applications roll in. And obviously you'll all probably get questions from your constituents or organizations that you're involved with about that application process. And we can kind of get them to the right people to make sure that they get their questions answered and can get their application into us. All right. Well, I don't think that I'm not going to hold you here, just holding you hostage. I think that we've accomplished what we wanted to accomplish today. And I'll just give you all a few minutes of your morning.
Commissioner,
Go ahead.
we have Commissioner Davis had his hand raised.
Oh, Commissioner
Yeah,
Davis.
And before we adjourn, I wanted to raise one more issue that I think we should talk about. But
Okay.
go ahead, Davis. Yeah.
Commissioner Davis, I didn't even know you were hiding here. Go ahead.
Oh, no. My calendars got mixed up, so I apologize, everyone, but please proceed.
No worries. We think something strange might have happened with this calendar invite, and we're not sure what went on, but you're not the only one that had some weirdness, but the invite was there, and then I don't know, something went strange with it, and we're not sure why that happened, but we appreciate you jumping on, and I can give you a summary later, Commissioner Davis, if you want to give me a call, or I'll shoot you an email, and we'll make sure that you get an update on anything that you missed. Kathleen, you had something you wanted to add?
Well, so I found the template. So I'm now working on the resolution for these capital projects here. That'll be in front of the ED&F, but it's due at noon today. That's why I brought it up. But the one thing I was going to add is the resolutions, they specify how much is being spent city versus county, right? And so one of the things that we wanted to do some cleanup was that way back when in August, initially I had put, well, and I don't have the details right in front of me, but I had, what was it? There was a project, gosh, I'm thinking it was 65,000, but don't quote me on it. There was so not a lot of money, but there's a project to that oh gosh, what was it? It was, no, it was, okay, so public health actually proposed the project initially, and that's just because they were in the midst of writing a bunch of proposals, but it was a cooperation with municipal court so that municipal court fines could be waived for clients that met the criteria, et cetera. And so like anyway, this project was actually a municipal court initiative, not necessarily public health. But so I didn't really notice at the time. And so I categorized it from the beginning as a county function. And then later it was pointed out to me that actually it's a city function because it's municipal court. And so one of the things I am proposing we do is in this resolution I'm working right now, just basically state as one of the whereases that we're switching it from court county to city. And so that's one of the things I'm going to add in here unless there's any objection. And I do want to point out that Bonner Springs, I think it was Bonner Springs, not so much Edwardsville. They have raised an issue with that. They felt, well, since it's allocated as county, we should get our share of that or something. And we have talked with Bonner Springs and Edwardsville about that if they actually want to do such an initiative, they can reach out to the judge and get more information, and then they can do it with their own ARPA money because it is a city function. It's municipal court, And so anyway, I just wanted you all to know that that's something I'm going to include in this resolution / ordinance in case you miss it, unless you object. Okay.
No, I think that makes sense. We're just going to take this opportunity when we're already coming before the commission to resolve that mistake and get it in the right place.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. All right. Any other questions, comments? Okay, team. Like I said, I feel like we finally got to a little place where there's a lull, which is lovely. We'll just move these things through the process and officially see each other again for this meeting in May. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.